Okay, the word Yovel actually means ram's horn. According to Leviticus 25, 8-12, the Yovel was signaled by the blowing of a ram's horn on the Day of Atonement. This is when Am Yisrael, the people of Israel, received forgiveness for sins. We know that the spring and fall Moedim are prophetic shadows of the first and second comings of Yeshua. He fulfilled each of the spring Moedim feasts to the day and hour, and we currently await the fulfillment of the fall Moedim. So the trumpet is sounded on Yom Kippur, ushering in the Yovel, freedom. Could it be ushering in freedom from death? As in 1 Thessalonians, the Lord himself would descend from heaven with a cry of command, with the voice of an archangel, and with the sound of the trumpet of God, and the dead in Christ will rise first. So we've got a trumpet being sounded, and we've got these people being raised from the dead. And then we who are alive, who are left, will be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air, and so we will always be with the Lord. I believe we got a foretaste of this during the Yovel that marked Yeshua's first coming. It says in Matthew 27, Yeshua cried out again with a loud voice and yielded up his spirit. Behold, the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom, and the earth shook and the rocks were split. And then it says, and the tombs also were opened, and many bodies of the saints who had fallen asleep were raised. And coming out of the tombs after his resurrection, they went into the holy city and appeared to many. I think this is just a picture of what will happen at his second coming. And I believe they were both Yovels these years. Right, freedom to return to the land. We know that just as it was Joshua who led the Israelites into the promised land, it will be Yeshua who will lead Israel back to the land upon his return. The Yovel is all about returning. Yeshua's second coming is all about gathering his people back to the land. Yeshua announced his first advent by reference to the Yovel. The Yovel, rather. I believe his second coming will also be on a Yovel year. When will it be? I'm not going to set a date. I'm just going to say what I think. Now for something I've thought for a while. And I was amazed, and I was truly amazed, to find this in the Living Waters commentary. So I'll share their take on it and just change the odd bit here and there. Because I've thought this myself, and I found it, and I was like, that's good. Let's just assume Yeshua's first coming, specifically his resurrection, which brought freedom to those in bondage to sin, coincided with the year of Jubilee. I think we've established that. We do not know exactly what year this was from creation, but let's say it was about 4,000 years after creation. That would mean that it was 80 lots of 50. Yeah? A Yovel is every 50 years, so 80 lots of 50 is 4,000. Now let's assume that Yeshua will return a certain number of Jubilees later. Let's assume if it was 4,000 years then, 2,000 years later, that would be another 40 times 50. That brings us to a total of 120 times 50, which would be 6,000 years since creation. And we've always seen this model, haven't we, of 6 days of man and then the millennial reign of Yeshua. So we can see that he would come back after 6,000 years of creation. That makes sense, doesn't it? Yeah. Those details in mind, let's factor in this verse. Yehovah said, my spirit shall not strive with man forever, for he is indeed flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years. And I know that James had seen a commentary saying this meant that the flood would come within the next 120 years. And maybe that's one way of looking at it, but there's another way of looking at it. This 120 years, okay? We know that man did not settle into an average lifespan of 120 years, so let's assume this verse is speaking of 120 Jubilee years. That would be 6,000 years, yeah, which is roughly what we already expect anyway, isn't it? So now, this is what we have for Yeshua. First Jubilee, where he brings freedom from sin, is 80 times 50 years from creation. Second Jubilee, where he brings freedom from this world and return to the land, is 120 times 50 years from creation. Yeah? Significant numbers seem to be 80 and 120. Does that make sense? We know that Yeshua is the living Torah and everything in the scriptures points to him, don't we? Moshe is synonymous with the written Torah, and look at how these significant numbers of 80 and 120 come into play in Moshe's life. We know that Moshe was 40 years old when he killed the Egyptian and he fled to Midian. It says in Acts, "Now he was 40 years old, it came into his heart to visit his brethren, the children of Israel, and seeing one of them suffer wrong, he defended and avenged him who was oppressed and struck down the Egyptian. Moshe fled and became a dweller in the land of Midian, where he had 2 sons. We also know that Moshe was 80 years old when the Exodus began. Exodus 7:7. Moshe was 80 years old and Aaron 83 years old when they spoke to Pharaoh. The Exodus was 40 years, which would make Moshe 120 years when he died, and when the children of Israel were on the very brink of the promised land, going into the land, it would not be Moshe, but Joshua, a type of Yeshua, who would bring them into the land. In Deuteronomy 31, and he said to them, "I am 120 years old today. I can no longer go out and come in. Also, Yehovah has said to me, you shall not cross over this Jordan." So notice the same significant numbers of 80 and 120 for Moshe. Freedom from bondage to slavery, 80 years old, when they came out of Egypt. Freedom to go into the promised land, to return to the land, when he was 120 years old. Can you see how that might represent the 2 Jubilee years that we've just spoken about? 80 and 120. 80 50s is 4,000, Yeshua's first coming. 120 50s is 6,000, Yeshua's second coming. His first coming, what did it bring us? Freedom from slavery, the bondage of sin, the bondage from Egypt. And the second one will bring us into the land. Another little interesting tidbit here is that the recorded event that preceded Yeshua reading from the scroll of Isaiah in Luke 4 concerning the year of Jubilee was the 40 days where he was tempted by the devil. This was a time of trial and testing, which is what the number 40 represents. And this correlates with the 40 years that Moshe spent in Midian, which actually means strife, before he came to announce their freedom from slavery. So if Yeshua's ministry was around 28 to 30 AD, I don't know, that's roughly what people say. Hosea 6:2 says this, "After 2 days he will revive us, on the 3rd day he will raise us up, that we may live before him." And 2 Peter says this, "Do not overlook this one fact, beloved, that with the Lord 1 day is as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is 1 day." So 2,000 years from his first advent takes us from 80 Yovels since creation, representing freedom from slavery, to 120 Yovels from creation, which represents returning to the land. That would lead us to believe that Yeshua will return somewhere around the year 2028 to 2030, if he's going to come back again on a Yovel. Yeah. And then, of course, we have to factor in this man here, the man of sin, who takes over the saints for a time, times and half a time. And then we've got this, the beast was given power for 42 months, so it's this 3.5 year period. Then the 2 witnesses, 3.5 years. And then here, the woman is led into the wilderness for 1,260 days, 3.5 years. So would that mean, assemble here about 2025 to 2027-ish? I don't know. But I think it's interesting the way the Yovel gives us an impression of Yeshua's first coming and his second coming. And we know it was every 50 years, don't we? So.